Hello, in this lecture we're going to continue with the Monopoly and Monopolistic Competition, Chapter 14. Our objectives are to summarize how and why the decisions facing a monopolist differ from the collective decisions of competing firms, determine a monopolist's price, output, and profit graphically and numerically, show graphically the welfare loss from monopoly, explain why there would be no monopoly without barriers to entry, and explain how monopolistic competition differs from monopoly and perfect competition. Okay, so here we have our numbers. We've talked about this before. We're basically going to graph this now. So we have another wonderful spreadsheet looking thing here. And we have our data where we have the quantity, the price, the total revenue, the marginal revenue, the total cost, the marginal cost, the average total cost, and the profit. So let's go through this. Then we're going to graph this and just see if we can get some inferences just from the data, what would happen in terms of a monopoly. Remember, what we're thinking about in terms of a monopoly is that we are the only ones that produce the particular thing that is there. So we have complete control over the market. So our control is complete in this case. If we think about that, then remember what we looked at last time in terms of perfect competition. We assumed that we were price takers. In this case, the price will change as quantity changes for us. So when we thought about perfect competition, one of the differences will be that we just assumed that the price was the same, because if we were to enter a market that is very competitive, like the hamburger market, we just made the same old hamburger as everybody else, then we basically would be price takers. We'd have to just use whatever price is there. On the other hand, if we make some new thing and it's the only new thing out there, then if we want to change the quantity, we're also basically going to have to change the price, because in essence, we're thinking about the entire market in that case. So note what we can think of which is the dependent and which is the independent variable here between price and quantity. But just notice that as quantity goes up, then the price is going to have to go down if it's going to be a normal good, which is of course what we're going to think about in this case. So I tend to think about it as we're going to change price as somebody who has a monopoly and try to see what happens to quantity. And of course, as the price goes down, we would assume that we would sell more. So in this case, in this graph, we're saying, well, if we had a price of 0 and we're the only people producing, and we're going to produce, if we have a quantity of 0 because we charged a price of 36, then obviously we have a total revenue of 0. Our costs are 47. Notice if we're not producing anything, those must be all fixed costs in this case. And then that means that our profit, 0 revenue, 47 costs, is negative on the 47. If we produce 1 unit then, and sell 1 unit, then in order to do that, we're going to have to lower the price to 33. So if we charge $33, then we can produce and sell 1 unit. That will give us a total revenue of 33. The marginal revenue, remember that's the change on the margin, from 0 is what we sold if we had 0 units, what we earned in revenue at 0 units, to 33 is a change, of course, of 33. If we think of the total cost, 47, that's like all rent, because even with 0 units we had 47. It only goes up by $1 in this case. So the variable costs in this case are just the $1. So the marginal cost, then the change in the cost is $1. And if we think about our profit, then the 33 minus the total cost is still negative of 15. We then want to have 2 units. So if we have 2 units, then that means that we're going to have to, in order to do that, we're going to have to lower the price to 30. So I almost think of it as if we lowered the price to 30 from 33, and we have complete control in the market, unlike perfect competition, because we're the only ones selling it, then people will buy too. And so that means that our total revenue is now 60. Our marginal revenue went from 33 to 60. That's going to be a change of 27. So notice marginal revenue is declining. We're having a reduced marginal revenue as we go. We'll see that graphically in a second. And then the total cost went from 48 now to 50. So now it went up by 2. That's the marginal cost, the change in the cost. And our average total cost then is 25. And that's going to give us the profit of the total revenue minus the total cost, and that gives us 10. Now, if we continue down this process, we're going to ask, well, where are we going to produce on this table? Where are we going to produce? Well, it's the same rule as it was with perfect competition. We're going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And so that means that we're going to produce profit maximizing quantity is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So that means that the next unit, we're always going to make the decision on the margin. The next unit of production is going to produce more revenue than more cost, then we're going to keep producing. At that point in time where the cost is greater than the revenue, we will stop producing, meaning that where are we going to maximize production? Where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, or where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So when we went to 3 units to 4 units, we had a marginal revenue of 15, a marginal cost of 8. When we go to the next unit from 4 to 5, we have a marginal revenue of 9, and then we go to 16. So somewhere in there we can see the maximizing profit if we look at the total profit being at the 34 here. So at 4 quantity we maximize. Note that then the total profit then goes down to 27 after that point. And obviously at this point, if marginal cost is greater than marginal revenue, what are we going to do? We're going to decrease production. As long as we're in this range, that means that marginal cost is less than marginal revenue. What are we going to do? Increase production. When we get to that point, just like within perfect competition where marginal cost equals marginal revenue or marginal revenue equals marginal cost, that's when we stop. That's where we will produce. All right, so if we thought about that graphically then, see what we have here is we've got the price and we've got the quantity, of course. We're graphing the marginal cost. Remember, that's going to be the change of the cost on the margin. We have our downward sloping demand curve, and of course the demand curve, as price goes up, the quantity goes down. And we also have a downward sloping marginal revenue curve. The marginal revenue curve is always going to be less than the demand curve. So if we think about this, then where are we going to produce graphically? And a thing we want to point out here too is that when we thought about perfect competition, we know that the marginal revenue, the demand, the price were all a straight line because we were price takers at that point in time. Since we're not price takers, we're basically the entire market. We have a downward sloping demand curve similar to a demand curve for an entire market, and our marginal revenue is a downward sloping curve. And our marginal revenue, because of the change because of the relationship of the fact that there's in order to produce a quantity more, we're going to have to reduce the price. They will both be downward sloping. Marginal revenue will always be less than the demand. You can analyze the graph up top again and here to kind of mull that over a bit more. Where are we going to produce in this type of graph then? We're going to produce where we always produce. We're going to produce where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. That's how many units we're going to produce. However, we're not going to charge that price if we're a monopoly, because our goal is, of course, to maximize the profit. And therefore, we're just going to say, well, at price, if we're going to have a quantity of 4, how much are people willing to pay for that? We're going to follow that up to the demand curve. And at a quantity of 4, people are willing to pay $24, which is different than the competitive price. So let's take a look at that one more time. If we have our monopoly and perfect competition comparison here, then we see that in a monopoly, the profit is going to be greater than the marginal revenue. If we're in perfect competition, we see that the profit equals marginal revenue equals demand. So when we were a firm in perfect competition, we were price takers. We had a straight line here for everything, for price, for marginal revenue, and demand, because we were price takers. Now we have this downward sloping line. However, we're still going to follow this rule, which is that we're going to produce at the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's the profit maximizing point. So where are we going to produce here? Once again, we're going to produce where the marginal revenue equals the marginal cost, right there. But we're not going to charge that price. We're going to charge what the demand price would be at that point up here. And then the perfectly competitive market, if we were to have a perfectly competitive market, if we had competition determining this market, the entire market, then the equilibrium price of this market in competition, rather than having one person completely control it, would be here. Outcome being that monopoly output is lower and price higher than perfect competition. Why would that be? Why would, if we had one person just doing everything, why would it come out to be that the output would be lower, meaning the pie is smaller, and we have higher prices? Why would that happen? Well, part of that is going to be the fact that if we have a monopoly, we have control. We can basically kind of generate our own scarcity of goods. If we're the only person producing it, we can basically limit the amount that is in the market and therefore charge a higher prices for that reason. So when we are in a monopoly, we will still produce where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. However, we will charge the price that is going to be demanded on that. So we can think about these same type of curves in terms of what will profit look like. And of course, profit will change in terms of monopolies. We can't charge whatever we want. We still have the same rules that we're trying to maximize profit. So if we look at this graph here, we've got the marginal cost, we've got the marginal revenue, average total cost. We can kind of think of that as our total cost curve. And where are we going to produce? We're going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's how many quantity we're going to produce. And then find out how much consumers will pay. We'll follow that up to the demand curve. This is the price that we will charge. Now we're trying to think about, well, what will our profit be then in this scenario graphically? Find the profit per unit where the profit maximized Q intersects the average total cost. So now we're going to go back down to where the average total cost curve is. So if we think about this, we've got kind of, you can think about this as three rectangles here. We've got the total revenue, which is this large rectangle. We've got the cost, which is going to be this rectangle. The difference between the large rectangle and the cost is going to be our profit. So since the price is greater than the average total cost at the profit maximizing quantity, this firm is earning a profit. So it is earning a profit. And you might think, well, all monopolies earn a profit, but that's not really the case. We could have a monopoly on something that isn't all that desirable, or something that is highly costly that is still monopoly. So we could have losses. This would be, in effect, if we look at a different type of scenario, where are we going to produce again? We're going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And if we take that to the average cost line in this case, then you'll see that we're right at the average total cost. So in order for us to maximize our profits, we're not making anything, even though we're a monopoly in this case. And then, of course, we have the one last scenario where are we going to produce in this scenario? We're going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. We're then going to pull that up to the demand. So now we're at the demand curve. However, it's still below the average total cost in this case. So this is the case where we actually have a monopoly and we're still losing money. So this is not a good situation, even though we have monopolistic power in this market.